Hi, jewells68 here for Talk to Me Tuesday on Tuesday, August 30th. Last Tuesday in August. I do have a little bit of something to show you. It's actually not anything I made originally from scratch, but it is something I repaired. And that is someone donated a blanket, flannel blanket to Project Linus. And it was basically 3 layers of flannel. It was someone had like top stitch or appliqued down a piece of flannel. The problem is they had zigzagged it onto the other piece of flannel and they hadn't folded it over to make a finished edge. I guess they thought the zigzag would take care of it. And it was a fairly short zigzag stitch. And then they had, after they had appliqued these little other pictures of flannel kitties onto a piece of brown flannel, which they then, when they appliqued it, again, they didn't fuse it. They just laid it on top and zigzagged around the edges, raw edges. Then they took that piece of brown flannel that had the kitties on it, and they just zigzagged that to a piece of pink flannel. Again, not folding over the edges, using a very short zigzag stitch. And then they, I guess pillowcased. I don't know if they pillowcased it, or by the looks of it, they just used a slightly larger piece of brown flannel and laid the pink flannel on top of it, and then folded the edges of the brown flannel over to bind it. And then they used yarn to tie it like a tied quilt in a bunch of places. The problem is, I'm pretty sure that what caused all the issues is they didn't pre-wash the flannel, because when it came to Project Linus, it looked like some of the seams were coming out. So I will show you, and actually the longer I had it, the director of our group asked me if I had any ideas for trying to fix it, because she feels like I'm a creative problem solver, I guess. And I've made suggestions before when stuff has come in that have worked out. So she said, do you want to take this home and see if you have any kind of inspirations on how we can salvage this and still be able to give it to someone? Because we felt like somebody had put some effort into it. Maybe they just didn't have a lot of knowledge. Maybe they were inexperienced, and so they didn't realize that it was going to fall apart after it was washed. So I took it home, and it sat around for 2-3 months with nothing happening to it, because I was busy working on, finishing Phoebe's quilt and birthday blocks and all that. So I dug it out towards the end of last week, I dug it out, and it was even falling apart more than before. So I will insert a picture of what it looked like before I started the repair job here. So as you can see, basically all along the top piece of brown flannel that was sort of, decorative, it was completely separating from the pink flannel, and the appliques were completely separating from the brown flannel. So that was obviously not going to work. My original thought was, and this is when I first brought it home, I was like, I'm going to zip this around and get it fixed up and take it back the next month. That didn't happen. But what I did do is I took it to Joann's with me, and I bought pink thread and brown thread, and I bought pink rickrack and brown seam tape, hem tape, thinking that I could use those to just cover the places, all of the seams, and that way it would keep them from falling apart anymore. So when I dug all that stuff out last week, I realized that this thing was way worse shape than we originally thought. It was just falling apart more every day. So what I ended up doing was I completely took off the piece of brown flannel that had the appliques on it. The pink and brown sewn together seem like they're going to hold together just fine. Now there are a few places where the zigzag missed in a spot here and there, but it's zigzagged twice. It's zigzagged once with brown thread, and then they used a decorative stitch, stretch stitch or something, to go all the way around with pink thread just as a decoration. And so I don't think that binding's going anywhere. And I wasn't about to pick it out. However, it was very easy, since the brown flannel was coming off the top. It was very easy to remove that. So I removed that, and adamant that I was not going to spend days on this thing. I was not going to pick out all of the zigzag stitches that were attaching the brown on, so I just left them there. And I covered them with brown seam tape, or hem tape. So I basically just went all the way around with the hem tape, completely covering the brown zigzag stitches. Then I took the piece of brown flannel that I had removed that had all the appliques on it, and I cut the appliques off, and I trimmed some of them down a little bit. Before I did any of that, I also cut out the yarn that was tying the layers together, because I wasn't really going to need the yarn anymore. I was just going to, because the stitching from putting the hem tape on there and then the stitching from putting appliques back on was going to go through all the layers, so I wasn't going to need the ties anymore. So what I did was I cut those appliques off and cut them down, trimmed them to make them look neat again. And what I ended up doing was using them to cover the holes, because the yarn, because it had been tied on there again before it had been washed, the flannel had been washed, when I cut the yarn out, it left some holes. So what I ended up doing was using way fewer appliques and just putting appliques over where the yarn holes were. And I fused them on first to make them even more stable and make them less likely to come apart. I fused them first, and then I went and zigzagged around all of the appliques. So now, because of those appliques being scattered throughout the blanket, and I did them all different directions, and the only reason there's a top and a bottom to this quilt is because of the label on the back. But I top stitched around, I zigzagged around all of them. After fusing them, they're not going anywhere. And the luck I've had with the fusible double-sided steam-a-seam or whatever is it's permanent. If you fuse it properly and follow the directions, it's not going to come off. It'll last through. I've used it for appliques to put decorations on t-shirts and stuff for Phoebe, and it was like 2-3 years of regular, like, weekly wearings and washings before it started coming off. And that was without any stitching going around it. So that was just with the fusing. So these things aren't going anywhere. I think they're still cute. There's not quite as many of them as there were before, but there's enough there to stabilize the layers and not have them coming apart. So, and then one of the yarn places left a kind of a big hole. So I took one of the pieces of appliques and I put a little kitty over the hole and just fused the crap out of it. Yeah, so that'll go in. It will not count towards my blanket tally for the year because I didn't make it. I just did a repair job, so I'm not going to count that. I'm not planning to. But that'll go at the September meeting. That'll get turned back in, and I will insert pictures show you so you can see what it looks like, all of it, because obviously you couldn't see it all with me holding it that way. I will insert pictures of the finished blanket here. And that's it. That's all I've got to show you. I look forward to watching your videos. I'm all caught up from last week finally. And I will see you next week in September. Bye!